Welcome, folks. This is your host, Prabal Gupta, and you are listening to the Capital Analyst. Our guest today is Mr. Havish Madhvapaty. Havish is a data analytics consultant, author, and educator. He teaches data modeling, visualization, and business intelligence to both students and employees across top B schools and corporate firms. He has also provided consultancy to organizations such as World Bank, SEBI, and various government ministries. He is a 40 under 40 analytics innovator and has been featured in the top 10 trending speakers list. Tune in to take a closer look at his journey as I talk to him on how he established his personal brand in the market. Welcome to the show, Havish. How are you doing?
Thank you, Prabal, for inviting me. My pleasure. I'm doing very well.
So let's begin right away. So in your journey, I see there are two transition phases. One is post your MBA, you started working at RB, and then you decided to switch from a corporate finance role to pursuing your Ph.D. in marketing. And then post that, you actually dropped out from your marketing Ph.D. and started your own analytics firm. So can you walk us through this journey? What was going through your mind when you took these decisions?
Yeah, I think these inflection points have been more than two. There has been quite a lot of zigzag that I have done. Most of it has been accidental. It's been very natural. But one thing I knew when I was pursuing my MBA was that I wanted to teach. And I'm not really sure when that thought came and why it came, but that's something I was very passionate about. But then Reckitt was a campus placement. It was too good an offer to let go of. And I'm an introvert. I'm somebody who likes working within four walls and working independently. So for me, getting into a sales role was me stepping out of my comfort zone. So I actively chose that. And I was very studious. So I was a gold medalist and I could have had any job I wanted, at least applied to any job that I wanted. But then I actively decided to go for a sales role because I wanted to challenge myself and step out of my comfort zone. Reckitt is a fantastic company, had a wonderful 2.5 years there. But then that niggling thought was always there that, I want to do something of my own and I want to teach. So I left Reckitt. Just one day I decided to leave. Came into academia for a few years. So I taught full-time at Amity University, worked as a research scholar, pursued my PhD for 4 years. Post that, I accidentally got into marketing research. So one of my students' brother-in-law was running a boutique market research firm. One thing led to another. I did some freelance projects and I never liked it. And this is something that we will circle back to. Sometimes you end up doing stuff that you're not sure how you got into it and you don't even like doing it, but you're very good at it. I was excellent at marketing research. I did that for a few years, worked for some boutique firms. But then I think somewhere in my heart, I knew all roads will lead to analytics, right? And you have to understand, when I did my MBA in 2009, data analytics, data sciences was not really the way we look at it today, right? I mean, of course, there were profiles and there were rows around data, but they were not very well defined. And mostly data analytics used to be in the realm of IT guys. So IT folks would be handling databases and also be responsible for creating dashboards. I mean, in the last dozen years, we have seen so much changing that in my heart, I knew I wanted to be in data, but because that ecosystem wasn't there, I wasn't even sure how to, sort of take the right steps towards it. So yeah, I started Havish M Consulting. I'll be completing 3 years in February next month. And yeah, I mean, so I'm finally doing what I love to do. So the two passion I have is, one is to teach, which is also something I get the chance to do being a data analytics consultant. And of course, working with corporate clients.
Got it. So I want to understand, like, this passion for analytics, like how did it come as a transition point from your PhD in experiential marketing? So what led to this crossover from a marketing domain, which some people would believe is something completely different, to an analytics domain, which is more number crunching and data visualization and data modeling?
Right. So the 4 years that I did my PhD in experiential marketing before dropping out, that had absolutely nothing to do with analytics, right? But my love with Excel started when I was in school, right? So this is going back all the way to 2002. So it's been almost 2 decades that I've been working on Excel. And I fell in love with Excel, the first time I started working with it. And then over these 20 years, wherever I have been, whether in the corporate stint, working in research, working as a faculty, or in marketing research, I never stopped working on Excel, right? I'm hyper competitive. I always wanted to be ahead of the curve. I wanted to know more than what other people in the room know. So Excel is something I never stopped working on. And I think that is something which naturally evolved into a training role as well. I never wanted to be a corporate trainer. It's again one of those accidental things. Somebody asked me, I did it, I loved it. And then, I've conducted 600 trainings to date. So yeah, the PhD had absolutely nothing to do with it. I think when you know you want to be in analytics, you just know it, right? It's not because of being in a certain environment. I guess you can come from any environment and still end up in analytics.
Interesting. So when you were deciding to leave your PhD midway and start your own firm, you initially started Decode Research and Analytics, and then you went on to find Havish M Consulting. So what was going on in your mind? What was your initial goal plan? Was it centered around teaching, or did you want directly to go into consulting or corporate training, as you said?
Yeah, so leaving my PhD was a tough call, right? Decode was a private limited. It was started by me and two other colleagues. We did very well. So we were profitable from first month, and we spent a year and a half building the business, and we did some really good projects. But then we had to disband because of internal dynamics and issues, not because the business as such did not have legs. The business had legs, but we had to disband it. It was a tough call because I was about 70% of my way, right, into my PhD. I had my papers published. I had all my content ready. It was a tough call, but, no regrets. It was a call I had to take. It was a call I had to take because I realized that I can't do both things, right? I was wise enough to understand that even if I take a semester off or 2 semesters off, it's not possible for me to devote the amount of time and energy into both these babies. And I took that call and I sort of stuck with it.
So when you were taking this call, so what was there a clear path to profitability you could see, or already you had 1 or 2 projects onboarded and you could see that this is not just a blind call and I can actually see this venture going somewhere, and that is why you took this big risk?
See, any entrepreneurial exercise will have a risk reward, right? It's definitely high risk. There's no guarantee of success, whether it's a Kirana store or it's a tech startup. At the end of the day, there are so many dynamics and external factors. There's no guarantee of success. I would not say that there was any clear road. We just knew in our heart that we want to do it, and we ended up doing it. And remember, Decode was a market research setup. So we were not even in analytics, right? In fact, on a lighter note, the joke that we had among the 3 directors was that we had analytics in the name, even though we did very little analytics, right? So we were more of a research firm, right? But then naturally it evolved into analytics, and post that is when I started Havish M Consulting, which is a pure analytics play.
Got it. So let's talk about Havish M Consulting now. So when you were starting this venture, did you already have a monetization plan in mind? Like essentially, when a lot of people start establishing their own brands, be it in whatever fields, what they worry about initially is that how is this brand helping them make money? And initially that's a tough call because you need to establish credibility, you need to establish connections, you need to maybe even give services for free for the first few months to gain that market credibility and market acceptance. So were you under pressure to have some monetization plan at the very outset, or were you open to experimenting with things and exploring what is out there?
Yeah, to be honest, no, because I was under no pressure. Because when I started Havish M Consulting in February 2019, I already had 3 to 4 years of experience working in market research. And I think one good that came out of it was excellent network, right? So I had my kitty of clients with me. And I jokingly tell, my interns and people in my team that I have been with clients and they have worked with me representing 3 different setups. So I've had clients who were initially working with Trevor's strategy consultants, the first firm that I worked with. Then they worked with Decode Research and Analytics, which was a private limited. And now they're working with Havish M Consulting. So the takeaway and the lesson here is that organizations stick with people, right? It's not really the brand. While a lot of people say that there's a lot of vanity at play because I have my name in the setup, Sure. I mean, there's not really much I can say to that, other than the fact that I wanted to have my name in the brand, and I don't feel ashamed about it. But yes, I mean, Havish M Consulting can change, right? But it is me and my work as an independent consultant, which will ensure that I keep on working with these clients.
So now that you have mentioned about networking and how crucial networks were as you were transitioning from one venture to the other to ensure your continuity as well as further expansion. So what exactly do you mean by networking and how important is networking? The reason I'm asking this is because networking is a buzzword these days, especially be it on social media, LinkedIn, or even personally. But people don't have a clear understanding of what exactly is meant by networking. Does it just mean knowing many people out there? Is it reflected by the number of people who follow you or who are your friends on social media? How exactly would you define networking and its importance?
Right. So I'm going to talk about the second part first, which is the quantity, right? The number of people who are your first and second and third degree connections. That's important too, to be honest, because numbers do matter, right? And you're not sure who's going to call you looking at whose profile. But then I think 90% of the weightage I would still give to the quality of relationships that you're building. And see, that takes time. It's very easy to have one good call or conversation with the client, but to be able to build that over 2-3 years, right? I think that's where the real meat is. And it's hard work. It's hard work. And just like it is in a personal relationship with a friend or somebody else, you have to understand there are highs and lows, right? And it's just genuine thoughtfulness towards the client that helps you build that connection. I mean, there's very little pretense that comes into play. I'm happy and proud to say that about 80% of the work that I do today is because of networks that I've built, right? This has been organic word of mouth where one person tells me that somebody else referred you. And I'm very proud, I'm very happy to hear that. In fact, the biggest client that I had till last year, I got the project because I missed my flight from Chandigarh to Delhi. I was on a train ride back to Delhi and I was in a very awful mood because I had an early morning flight the next day. There was a gentleman sitting next to me and one thing led to another and he took my number. I forgot about it. After 6 months, I got a call from the HR and that client became my biggest client for 2 years, right? Just because, not because I was being chatty and pally just on face value, right? It was a genuine interest in the other person's problems, right? A genuine interest in sharing what you do. And I think that is what works in the long run. So a lot of B school students who work with me, when they say we are trying to reach out to people, I tell them people will give you time, right? There are a lot of entrepreneurs and mentors that you will find on the internet, and they're happy to give you time. But then you have to fight for their time. That's one. You have to make them feel that their time spent is valuable. So if somebody is giving you 30-45 minutes, are you really listening to them? You know, I am very blunt when I tell a mentee that I'm going to tell you to stand, you stand. When I tell you to sit, you sit. Right? Because see, this is how my relationship has been, right? I work with a lot of CXOs. In fact, today, most of my work is with CXOs and I learn a lot from them and they can be very upfront. But I listen to everything they say with both my ears open, right? So I think it's the quality, not the number of relationships that matter, and build it over a period of time. You know, it's very easy to give ourselves an excuse that because of so-and-so reason, it sort of collapsed or it fell out of place, but you have to build it, right? Just like any other relationship in life, you have to build it over a period of time.
That's a very interesting aspect to talk about. Because the conception that I had was networking is all about adding value to people. So like, let's say if I am asking for someone's time and talking to them, like I had that in my mind that I should add some value to that person or talking to me should be value enriching for that guy. But what you say also makes sense right now that it's not just you adding value. At times you also have to be an active listener and ensure that the other person feels that the 30 minutes they spent talking to you was actually valuable and you actually got something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have very strong thoughts on that because I have this conversation like 100 times a month, right, with all the B schools that I teach. So you have to understand, you can't really add a lot of value to somebody who has 15, 16 years of experience. With your 2-3 years of experience, you have to understand the role that you're playing is not to add value, but to extract value. And that in itself motivates the other person to give you time. when you ask somebody for 10 minutes and that ends up being a 90-minute conversation, why is it so? Because the mentor feels that they are adding value to you, right? So be a little selfish, right? Fight for other person's time and stop telling yourself what value you're adding. See, that's not your game to play. That's for the mentor to decide if they are getting something out of it or not. Now, it's very easy for you to say, what do I get? When somebody calls me at 11 o'clock in the night and I stop the work that I'm doing because that guy has, let's say, an interview the next day, I spend time because it's my way of giving back to the community, right? I've been in those pair of shoes. And is that person really adding value in a tangible monetary term? No. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So I think we should all stop living in the pretense that we have to add value back to the mentor. If somebody is giving you time, appreciate it and make sure you make the most of it. I think the biggest satisfaction for me is that if I'm giving somebody time and they make out something beneficial out of that time, I think that is the only ROI that I'm seeking from that conversation.
Interesting. That's definitely an interesting perspective that you bring out. So right now you have talked about organic ways of growing, that you established some credibility, some client referred you to another clients, and that is how that chain started and you kept on growing. But did you also try your hands with inorganic ways of growing, be it marketing or social media advertising and stuff like that, especially since you have some marketing experience, given that you were pursuing a PhD in marketing? So did you bring that array of tools also when you were promoting your analytics startup, be it Decode or Havish M Consulting?
So the short answer is no. I have not done any marketing in the conventional way that you would think of. My marketing mostly has been internal marketing within an organization. So for example, let's say I work with a lot of energy and power companies. So if I work with an organization in the HR function, then I will internally market myself to other functions, right? Because I always feel it's easier to capture that captive market rather than reaching out to other people. And the other thing is that, okay, so you have to listen to what I'm saying in keeping in mind the fact that I am an introvert. I'm somebody who I'm more than happy working alone without needing any social interaction. But I realized very early in my consulting career that I have to not just overcome it, but I have to learn to like talking to people. And there's the difference. A lot of people always say that, okay, fine, I'll make a compromise or I'll do it. And I tell them, no, it's not just about doing it. It's about learning to like to do it. If you don't like working in finance or working with numbers, figure out a way that it excites you. Don't just do it as a task, because when you do it as a task, there's only so long that you can go and run with it, right? So, okay, so I'll give you an example. So there was this gentleman at one of the organizations I was working with, and I was in excellent terms with a lot of other people. This one bloke, for whatever reason, I could not never, get across to. But I made it a point. I made it a point that I have to crack it, right? Now, you might say, why and what was the need? There was no need. It was just a personal challenge that I gave to myself, that I have to figure out a way, and, we have to find a fit where we can learn from each other. And I'm happy to say that we are very close friends today. So I think pick up these small challenges, just like you pick up a challenge in a case study and you say that I have to solve this problem in 30 minutes or I have to come up with a good business actionable. Similarly, when it comes to relationships and people, why do you want the easy road? Why don't you go to the toughest guy, out there and try to crack that person? I was reading an article in HBR recently, which said that a lot of time we do an excellent job and we present it to the faculty or to our peers or in our internship, and we don't really get the appreciation that we feel we deserve, right? So what the writer said was, and this was a very interesting point, she said it's not about your idea not being good. Maybe it was a brilliant idea, but you have to understand that the CXO is seeing 15 brilliant ideas every day. So for a moment, put yourself in his or her shoes and try to understand your idea need be brilliant, yes, but it has to be something more than that. You just can't say that the idea merit is so good. You also have to give that next 2 or 3 steps talking about how to deploy it, how to make it actionable, right? And that was a very important takeaway for me, because a lot of time as a programmer, we write a complex bit of code and we are so happy at the fact that we figured it out. But what we don't realize is that that was not really the requirement, right? The requirement is to create a user experience, to have the user acceptability, right? So I think that's very important for everybody to keep in mind. which is that your idea might be brilliant, but then that's not where the story ends, right? You also have to help the client understand how they're going to utilize it, right? It's not that I'm selling a product and I'm running away, right? You have to sell a product and help them utilize the most out of that product.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So let's now for a moment shift gears and talk about what you actually do. So when it comes to analytics, people have some kind of understanding that it involves data processing, maybe machine learning tools, regression, and all these kind of data analysis techniques. But when it comes to analytics consulting, which is kind of what you do, can you help us? Can you help the viewers as to what exactly is the kind of projects that you work on? What is the value you add to the client? What is the kind of deliverables they expect from you? Maybe through an example or through some case study that you have been working.
So my work is as a data analytics consultant, which means that it's a combination of working on data, but at the same time also sitting down with the client and understanding how to use the insights that we're generating, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not about just creating the model or writing a better formula, but also helping coach people, upskill teams, right? Reduce the turnaround time, improve the efficiency, do a little bit of automation, right? Is it a very atypical profile? Not really. If you look at the Big Fours also have consultants who work in data analytics, and they do a very similar job to what I do. The difference being that I work as an independent consultant. So a typical project that I would be working on is where a client hires me and says that we have certain Excel models and Excel formulas, but we want to reduce the turnaround time, right? So let's say they have 5 people working, and then they plan and understand that it is taking them 30 hours to complete that task, and they want to reduce it to 10 hours. Now, why would they want to do that? Because it's a clear correlation, right? You reduce the number of hours, you have to get fewer people on the team, and you save money on it. The other reason you want to automate tasks is because when 15 people with their 2 hands are working, errors will happen, right? Manual mistakes will happen. That's why we want to automate things, which I do on Visual Basic and Power Query. So we do automation of everything, any business model, any Excel file, something as simple as taking Excel charts from Microsoft Excel to PowerPoint, which typically a person would be doing manually. We automate those things for them. Then another side of work that we do is data visualization. So my work is not to create something from scratch, because organizations already have their guys, right? Their internal teams who are doing that. So the word I'm looking at here is enhancement. We enhance and improve the way people work. Again, we help them reduce errors, reduce the turnaround time, and improve efficiency and the quality of the insights that they are presenting. So typically I get hired to create a setup, create a blueprint for the organization. And once I leave after, let's say, a 3-month engagement, internal guys can take it forward, right? So just like you write a piece of code and you put the documentation so that it's modular and people can continue working on it. Similarly, when I create an Excel model, there is the entire documentation created so that it is not just a one-time exercise, but it's an exercise that the client can carry forward. So about 70-80% of the work I do is between Excel and Power BI. The balance 20% is scattered between a lot of other things. So I do a little bit of data science on Python and R. I do some bit of web apps on JavaScript. And as and when the requirement comes, we work on different platforms, right? But the bulk of work we do is on Excel and Power BI. And for the foreseeable future, that proportion is expected to be the same.
Got it. So talking about data visualization, because this is something that has come up recently, even tools like Power BI have probably sprung up in the last 2 to 3 years and have become popular recently. So how important is data visualization to the whole process of data analytics? Because for a long time, the impression that I got in the industry was people kept focusing on analytics and learning about statistics and regression and econometrics and the maths and science that goes behind crunching numbers, but not a lot of material or information or tools were available to present that data. So how important is data visualization? What are your views about it? How important do you feel is it for clients, and does it really make an impact, or is it just aesthetic sense, adding aesthetic sense to already crunched numbers?
Right. So before I talk about data visualization, I also want to talk about all the buzzwords that you just threw at me. And this is a problem in the industry, and not just with B school students, but with business leaders as well, right? because there are all these terms that float around and we love to throw them across the table, right? Yeah. So having the distinction between what is important to you versus what is important in the industry is very important. For example, just because Python and R might be growing rapidly doesn't necessarily mean that you have to learn it. Just because robotic process automation is again growing exponentially doesn't necessarily mean that you have to learn it. So the fact that you have to prioritize what to learn partly, and what you can skip for the moment, I think that's also a very important skill, because colleges, for that matter, even organizations, are not going to teach you, right, where to invest your time. For example, if you go to YouTube and you go to a channel like Free Code Camp, there are hundreds of hours of videos available. Now, learning to identify the right content is a very important skill, right? Something that I take a lot of pride in. So again, before I circle back to data visualization, to all the listeners, please keep in mind, it is very important to understand what are the words out there. Please prepare a list. Forget the lists that are already out there on the internet, right? Those have not been written by you. They have not been written for you, right? For you to understand your career path, you have to prepare your own list. Keep a list of 100 terms that you find out there. Do a color coding, do a RGB, whatever you're comfortable with. But at the end of the day, you have to prioritize. These are the things which is a must know. These are the things which is a should know. And these are the things which are do not need to know, right? And nobody can do that for you. Okay, coming back to data visualization. So there's a very interesting backstory here. Data visualization is not a new term, right? The tools that you see today, Power BI, Tableau, they have been tools like these for over 3 decades now, right? If you look at a tool like IBM Cognos, right? It has been around for such a long time. But when we look back at, let's say, 2005, 2008, 2010, organizations were not really ready to utilize these tools to the fullest. And the biggest problem there was that the people who were creating data visualizations were the IT folks, not the business guys, right? Now, IT guys are responsible for handling databases and managing data. They are not the best guys at telling stories, right? They're probably the worst of all in the business to tell a story. And that's the reason why, if you look at a lot of these old dashboards that were created, they were extremely ugly. They had absolutely no insight that they were presenting. They were just pretty pictures, on a piece of paper. What has happened in the last 6, 7, 8 years has been that it has become democratized, right? Now, organizations expect everybody in the organization to learn how to do storytelling with data, right? I mean, when I was in Reckitt, we were not expected to create dashboards, right? We had teams that were doing it. I mean, I was in sales. The most expected out of me was to create a pivot table. That's about it. Now, what has happened is that you have all these self-service tools like Power BI, which means that an end user without any IT background can directly connect to the SQL server, can import the data, can create the visualization, use no-code, low-code AI and ML, and then present it to the management, which means that a lot of these layers in the middle are not required anymore, right? So the bottom line is that everybody has to learn storytelling with data, right? That's what I tell everyone. Whether you're in HR, finance, marketing, sales, it doesn't matter. Storytelling is as important a skill as, let's say, communication or business writing or email writing, right? It's not only for certain functions and sub-functions. And storytelling is a lot more than just learning how to make a dashboard, right? Storytelling is about design thinking. It's about aesthetics, like you said. It's about learning the technical features in these tools, right? So it's everything wrapped into one. So yeah, I mean, storytelling requirements are only going to increase with time. And it's not easy. Organizations have a lot of challenge with storytelling because it's easier to teach somebody how to work on Python. It's very difficult to teach somebody how to do good storytelling with data, right? Because there are so many multidisciplinary aspects that come into it, right? There's psychology. So for example, when I do trainings on storytelling, we talk about certain principles called the Gestalt principles, which talk about how objects are in proximity or how you do closure in an object. Now, all of this might sound a little odd, that why we're talking about design when we are talking about data analytics, but you have to understand it's a very porous line, right? Tomorrow, if I'm presenting a dashboard to a client, I can't get that project purely on the merit of my ability to write a complex query or a formula. I have to be able to present it well, right? And that's something I'm really good at because I come from a background of design. That's something I've loved to work on, and I work with Adobe application. But then the fact that you have tools like Canva today, right, means that it is accessible to everyone. So everybody feels that they're a designer just because they have Canva. But what they don't realize is that learning how to use it effectively is also a skill that you have to develop, right? And that takes a lot of time and conscious effort and practice.
Got it. But don't you think in the name of storytelling, people these days tend to overdo data visualization? Like that is something that I have come across, that when it comes to making slides or even creating a PowerPoint pitch, people tend to just clutter it with all kinds of charts or diagrams or graphs. Or even when it comes to, like, there are a lot of people these days posting snapshots of their dashboards on LinkedIn. And I personally get the feeling that there's too much information out there, even though it looks visually appealing, but I can't really process what is happening here, or what exactly, what are the key variables that I want to monitor, or what are the key KPIs I want to keep a track of. So do you think there's a tendency to overdo data visualization just in the name of aesthetics, or trying to come across as very comprehensive and effortful?
Could not agree more with that, right? Yeah. And see, you have to understand it's just something that happens in the industry, right? We have to present flashy stuff. Even as a consultant, sometimes you have to do flashy stuff, right? But yes, on a very serious note, that is the problem. And I think this problem is more prevalent in B-school students. And the reason is because you guys feel this is the most important part of creating a dashboard. It isn't, right? Let me tell you, when you talk about, let's say, going downward from top to bottom. So when we have let's say the board of directors and going to the CXOs, N-1, N-2, 99% of the visualization that we create are between a pie chart, line chart, bar chart, column chart, and that is it. That's where 99% of the work happens. Now, you might argue and say that, but is a tree map not a better option, right? Or a radar chart not a better option? Or one of those fancy visualizations that you have on Power BI. But you have to understand, are they consumable? If you're presenting something which is going to take that person an extra 15 seconds to consume, CXOs don't have that amount of time. Plus, you can't take the risk that something is misrepresented or misunderstood, right? Because if it is construed in a different way, that's a big risk. You know, this is something I also learned early in my consulting days. I used to put everything in the kitchen sink in it, right? Like I used to search for the craziest, most sophisticated visualizations. There are more than 300 on Power BI, and put it on my report. And when I used to present it, they just used to strike off 9 out of 10 of them. And I used to get a little irritated, you know, because I used to sell my client on the need of going beyond what they are currently working on. But then you have to realize, the bigger an organization, the more complex it is to have a data culture, right? You know, just like organizations have an organization culture, there is also a data culture. So for example, I work with Sterlite Power. I work with Adani Power, right? Now they are competitors, but the way they handle their data could not be more different, right? The way they prepare their Excel models, the way data is transferred between different teams in the organization is just so different. It could be two different companies and two different industries for all we care. So the point I'm trying to make here is that when we talk about data visualization, it's not about the variety of visuals and the fancy stuff. And let's be honest, I mean, it's just a few clicks, right? I mean, creating something fancy on Power BI is not difficult because these tools today have become so easy to work with, right? What I would look at when somebody comes to me and presents something is, why did they choose to keep these 5 visuals? You know, I would like to know the story behind it. So if somebody says, you know, I made a line chart and I opted over the 5 other alternatives that we had, I need a reason for that. I don't want to hear that I chose it because it looks pretty. There has to be a reason for it, right? Also, how do visuals fit with each other? You know, there has to be a coherence to what you're presenting. Because at the end of the day, if something is too cluttered, like you said, it's not really solving any purpose, right? I think it will even out over a period of time. Right now, everybody has that craze where these tools are new, even though they're not actually that new. Tableau has been around for, what, 18, 19 years now. Power BI is 6 years old now. But in the last 18, 24 months is when B school students typically have started using Power BI a lot. Even organizations, most organizations that I work with, their life cycle with Power BI is at a very early stage. So right now they're very happy working with visualizations. Over a period of time, they will start working with Power Query, which is the ETL capability. And then eventually they will mature into the data modeling, where multiple files can be combined. Right? So the lesson here is please focus on the business objective, on the actionables that you're presenting. Because if the other person knows how easy it is to create a visualization, you can't really impress them with that. Focus more on the colors, focus more on the guidelines, on the psychology principles that you're using. Don't try to impress people with the variety of visualizations that you're using.
Got it. So we'll come back to the business intelligence part, that how can you link your visualizations to the business objective. But one slight question I had around data visualization was, at times I feel it is also prone to a bit of manipulation. So if, like, let's say if you're making a bar chart or a line chart, just adjusting the scale can portray a very different information as to what kind of growth the company is seeing, even though the numbers remain the same. So how do you as consultants or as data analytics professionals ensure that data visualization does not mask the true potency or the true meaning of those numbers?
See, I think most of the time we do data visualization purely for the reason you mentioned, right? Okay. Which is that we want to prioritize certain things. I don't really have an easy answer to that. You know, it's something that is accepted in the industry, and it's a very personal call. You know, for example, a client or an organization might be okay with it. A client might be very rigid and say, show me, you know, the spades as it is, right? So I'm not really sure how to comment on that, other than the fact that you have to learn what the industry wants as well. You know, we can't be fighting against everybody and saying, no, I will present the data the way it is. See, it's in a lot of ways, when you use visuals effectively by spotlighting or focusing on a certain perspective, that is also important because it makes your report readable and consumable to a lot more readers, right? So that's the good side. You know, there is a good part to it as well. On the flip side, of course, there are a lot of negatives, but then manipulation is, I think, a very harsh term that you're using. You know, that is where we're talking about fudging the data and, you know, extrapolating ineffectively or inefficiently. But yes, I mean, using visuals to present the way you wanted to present, sure, I mean, that will always happen. And you have to understand, right? See, everybody has a boss. I mean, the CEO of a company also has to present something to the board. And if playing around with the visualization helps you present your point a little more effectively, all power to that. There's nothing wrong with it. And I think it's a very internal, sort of central line of integrity that you have. You know when you're doing something right or wrong. You know, I just sort of put it like that.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. So now coming back to the business objective part. So one side of the play is that you understand your numbers, you understand analytics, you understand visualization. But the other side is you also need to understand what exactly the business is all about. What is this number capturing and how is it relevant in the larger scheme of things for that particular business? So how do you combine these two? Because this is something that I feel a lot of people struggle with. They are either good at one of these two things, but are not really able to connect the story of that business or the value of that business with the numbers or the analytics.
Sure. So first, the difference between a data scientist and a data analyst, right, is still quite misunderstood. And I find it very surprising because while there are commonalities, it's like a Venn diagram with a common area. It's quite clear which one is which, right? So to all the listeners, a data scientist would be somebody who's typically working at the backend with little to no client interface. They are the ones creating the algorithm, creating the models, and they don't really create PowerPoint presentations and present it to the client. Also, they need to be very good with mathematics and statistics. A data analyst, on the other hand, is more of a consultant, you know, somebody with a direct client interface, somebody who's expected to not just talk about the model and the analytics, but also talk about how the business will use it, right? Now, the common areas like data cleaning, basic data visualization, of course, will remain the same. For example, I am 90% of a data analyst, only 10% of a data scientist, right? While a lot of people refer to me as a data scientist, I correct them. And I tell them my work is not really in data science, right? While today I do a little bit of work in natural language processing, web scraping, the bulk of my work still is in the realm of, doing Excel modeling, right? So yeah, I think that distinction is very important. And just a cursory Google search will give you all the differences that you need to know, right? That's fun. Prabal, just tell me, what was the question again?
So now that you have mentioned about data analytics, so linking it with the business objective, and how do you
Right.
ensure that the numbers
Correct.
correspond to the
So
business objective?
absolutely. Right. So I will answer it in this way. A lot of students ask me, we need a data set to work on, right? And I tell them, go to Kaggle and pick one. They say, no, we want a real data set to work on. And I always jokingly tell them, what do you think a real data set looks like? I mean, for example, if I'm working with an organization, do you feel it is this magical data set with this something I've never seen earlier? Of course not. What you find on the internet as a dummy or a sample data set available, that is what you will find in our internal, actual working files as well. The only difference is that our data set is more scattered because it's in silos. It's not clean. There's a lot of data cleaning that you have to do. Other than that, what you find on the internet is exactly the same, right? Okay, when it comes to having a fitment with the business objectives and the business needs, that is a little difficult because creating a dashboard is the easy part. Let's say you take a sales and marketing data set and you say, these are my top end customers and this is my trend line and my forecast and all of that. Taking assumptions is very important, right? So if you have not been given problem statements, build your own problem statements, right? For example, if I have a marketing and sales data, I would say, let's assume that the company wants to divest from the bottom performing categories. What would you do, right? Perform an RFM analysis, right? Create a Pareto chart, find the customer lifetime value. If you're in HR, you can look at different business cuts like gender diversity, recruitment, compensation benefit, rewards recognition, right? I mean, just look at the top 10 requirements that are common to every business, right? If you're in finance, you're looking at AOP versus achievement, right? So you're looking at the budgets. You can look at practical financial planning analysis problems like consolidating multiple files. Dates are a very important thing. So with dates on any programming language and on Excel and Power BI, working with dates is a very important skill because dates come in many forms and sizes and shapes. So the point I'm trying to get across is that finding problems is not really difficult. Also, trying to identify problems is also a skill. The number one takeaway would be to go to medium.com. Go to medium.com, just search for marketing analytics, HR analytics, customer cohort, and you're going to find dozens of brilliant articles, which are ranging from quick reads to long form articles. And I think that's the biggest treasure trove for any B school student, right? Going here. Of course, you can go to Kaggle and GitHub and all of that, but that's mostly for data analysts purely and for programmers. But I think Medium for all B school students is super, super important. So when a student applies to me for a live project and they say, sir, can you share with us a problem statement? I tell them, I'm giving you the data set, build problem statements for me. You understand what I'm saying, right? Mostly when you work with an organization, it's not that they have nicely written 3 bullet points that I want this, this, and this. Where's the fun in that? They say that there is a broad problem. For example, I'm working with a very large BFSI client right now. And it's a very interesting problem that they have. They have a 38% attrition, right? Which might sound shockingly high. It is high, but not shockingly high because the industry is like that. But the problem is that the business is performing very well. So now the conundrum that the chairman and the CEO are in is that should they do something about it or not? Like we say, don't fix something that isn't broken. That's the problem they have because business is growing, top line, bottom line, everything is growing. All the KPIs are on track. But they have a feeling that there might be a lag effect, which means that the high attrition that is there right now might not create a problem in, let's say, the next 4 or 6 quarters, but there might be a spillover effect that might happen later, right? Now, this is all the client has told me. The client hasn't even said whether they want to fix it or not. But what they have said is that we want to explore the possibility that do we need to do something about it? So at this stage, what I'm doing is going through all their attrition data. So we're looking at joiners, people who are leaving. We are trying to create a chain. So we are trying to see that at each level, so from ASM to RSM to ZSM to NSM, at each level, are people leaving? And are people leaving in droves, or are people leaving in single digit numbers? And we're trying to build some models around it, and then trying to go back to the chairman and present scenarios, right? Presenting scenarios is very important. I judge so many competitions every year.
Mhm.
And students always have this feeling that we will come up with that one solution. And I tell them why. I would have loved to see 4 solutions rather than see that one perfect solution, because the amount of effort that you've spent into fine tuning and polishing that one solution could have been better spent coming up with 4 variable solutions, right? So I think that's key here. So these are the sort of projects I work on. And at the end, see, it all boils down to the student taking a lot of proactive effort. For one, I have over 250 students who have done their live projects with me in the last 3 years. Not even with a single student have I said that I'm going to give you the problem statement, because I want them to see, I want them to explore, I want them to read, do their bit of research, and then come back to me and say that, see, this is what I came up with. Maybe they come up with a completely foolish idea, that's okay. But at least they know never to do it again, right? But yeah, I put the onus on the student here. And I would suggest to all the B school students to please make sure that when you're speaking to somebody in the corporate, their time is very precious. Don't go and say, I will work hard and I will stay up till 4 a.m. and do what you ask me to do. Tell them what you can do, right? And never ask yourself, is it too little? A lot of students might say, but why would Havish want to take me for this when he can do it himself? See, that's not really the point, right? I mean, if that was true, I would never have had live projects. I can do everything myself. It is a focus. I can't invest all of my time on all the 15 things that I want to work on, right? For example, right now I'm building a course on HR analytics on Excel. Now, I don't have the energy to research 50 links and capture all the interesting things there. So I'm looking for a student who will help me with that. But if a student comes and says, tell me what to read and tell me what to do and what you want, no, that doesn't cut it, right? I mean, the analogy I will give is that imagine I go to a client, I'm prospecting a new client. When I have that first meeting with the client, do you think I'll go empty-handed and ask the client, what do you want? I'll definitely do it for you. Of course not. I'm going to prepare like 15 ideas and throw everything at the client. Maybe 14 of them fail, but maybe one sticks. Jeff Bezos always says that as a business, you don't need to succeed at everything. Out of every 10 things, I'm paraphrasing here, out of every 10 things that you do, 9 are going to fail. I mean, look at the Amazon phone, for example. There have been many endeavors that have failed miserably. But he says that one thing that will succeed will be such a gigantic success that it will overshadow everything else. And the same thing I tell students, when you are pitching to 10 corporate clients or startups or people like me, independent consultants, don't think about the failure ratio. I mean, you just have to succeed 1 out of 10 times, right? And the other 9 times that you did not succeed, you know that it wasn't good enough, right? Or it was not the right fit for the company. So yeah, I mean, basically find your own problem statements.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. So one question I had, since now you are talking about B school students and the kind of projects they work on. So given your extensive experience in teaching and working with them, what is one of the few things that you see them getting wrong again and again, especially when it comes to analytics? So maybe something related to interpretation of analytics or how they process things, some common misconceptions or wrong practices that you have observed in your experience that people tend to keep on repeating.
Well, I don't know where to start. There are a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is not doing descriptive statistics, right? For example, if I've given a data set with 50,000 records in it, and let's say 20 columns in it, the first thing I would like to know is something about the data. If I ask a question, can you tell me the range of sales? Like what was the minimum and the maximum value? You have to know that answer, right? Now, a lot of people will jump into correlations and visualizations, but you have to go to the basics first, right? First, do the descriptive statistics. Look at the spread of the data. Simple things like standard deviation, variance, correlation, skewness, kurtosis. These are 9 out of 10 times left out, right? And most students have either completely forgotten about it or they don't have that level of clarity which is required, right? So it's super, super important to have your foundation in place. Second thing is not to focus on the PowerPoint, which they don't, right? So it is very important to focus on the PowerPoint presentation. Also, you have to understand that when you're creating your analytics on Excel, let's say creating a pivot table or creating a chart, you don't do your Excel first and then copy and paste everything into PowerPoint. That doesn't make sense, right? Because when you're putting it in PowerPoint and you feel that the story is not being driven properly, it's too late to do anything about it. How you plan your PowerPoint has to be in tandem with Excel. See, Excel is the back end, but the front end here is the PowerPoint. When you know that you're going to present a PowerPoint at the end to me or to the client, the choice of chart that you are opting for in Excel also has to be deliberated on, right? You can't just randomly pick a chart that looks good on Excel and then expect it to work the same way on PowerPoint, right? So please focus on the fact that at the end of the line, you are going to put everything in a PowerPoint presentation. So please keep that in the back of your head while you're doing your analytics on Excel, right? Okay, the other thing would be learning tips and tricks and shortcuts in Excel. As a part of a data analytics project, the thumb rule we follow is 80-20. So 80% of the time we spend is on the data wrangling, massaging, cleaning, ETL. Only 20% of the time goes into the visualization. And it's a thumb rule that 9 out of 10 times holds true even for me, right? And that would hold true for a student as well. The point here is that learning how to do your cleaning faster is going to go a long way, giving you more time for the visualization bit, right? So if you're able to reduce by 10% the amount of time you spend on cleaning the data, it is going to help you a lot. So please go and learn all the tips and tricks and shortcuts that you can. Other point is to extract the most from Excel, right? Today, Excel is not just formulas and functions. People refer to Excel as VLOOKUP, index, indirect, match, address, pivot tables. It's more than that. That's only 1/5 of Excel. So that's 20% of Excel, formulas and functions. Another 20% of Excel is Visual Basic for application. That is the programming backend. The third 20% is Power Query, which is an ETL tool. It uses a language called M, which also works on Power BI. The fourth 20% is Power Pivot, which is data analysis expression that you use for creating, combining multiple pivot tables and creating measures on pivot tables on data models. And the fifth 20% is JavaScript and TypeScript. Because about 5 years back, Microsoft is now moving Excel towards JavaScript. So earlier, Excel would never work on the web because Visual Basic would never work on the web. But now Excel can have web apps in it. So I can do API calls within Excel. Excel has an entire IDE within it in which I can write my JavaScript and TypeScript. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you only know formulas and functions, you basically are talking only about 20% of Excel, right? So you can't be advanced user only knowing 20% of it, right? That's one. Also learn different tools parallelly, because it's not an either or. It's not that should I work on Excel or should I work on Power BI? Learning to integrate different tools is also a very important skill. So rather than learning one tool, wrapping it up and then learning the second one, you have to learn it parallelly. I think that's key because for certain tasks, I would prefer using Excel over Power BI, right? For certain tasks, I might want to do it in Python and then bring it over to Excel and then send it to Power BI, right? So learning the order and learning the proportion and learning the integration between different tools is super important, right? That's also something a lot of students skip out on. I think these would be the important points, right? So focus on learning tips and tricks, focus on extracting everything from Excel that you can, and learning how different tools integrate with each other. And of course, at the basic level, understanding what the data even is, right? Before jumping into conclusions.
Got it. That's great advice, Havish, and I think a lot of people will benefit from that. So one question I have around is, so whenever you're working on your own venture full time, one of the biggest constraint is how you manage your time, especially given your job where you are talking to clients, doing corporate trainings, conducting workshops in B schools. Also, you are learning for your own self as these tools update, as these newer versions come up, as well as you are experimenting on your own, be it at GitHub or making videos or promoting your consultancy on LinkedIn and all these things. So what is your go-to tool to manage time, or how do you allocate time to stuff so that you are on track in all these fields?
I'm a very simple guy. All my to-do lists are on Excel,
okay.
which is quite unsurprising. You know what? I think do what works for you, right? I mean, if creating a Google keep to-do list works for you, do that. If you are a pen and paper person, do that. Stop looking at what others are doing. I mean, you should know what others are doing because you might get to know something that you weren't aware of. But at the end of the day, do what works for you. And the other thing is that I constantly change the way I work, right? For example, sometimes I focus an entire month on learning one tool, so I might spend an entire month learning nothing but Power BI. But there are certain other months where I work on 5 different things parallelly. Like if I speak about today, I'm working on certain web apps on JavaScript on Excel. I am learning web scraping in natural language on Python. I'm working on the Lambda function, which has just been introduced in Excel. The point I'm trying to make is that I'm doing a lot of different, in certain ways, unconnected and disconnected things at the same time, because it seems to work for me, right? So my point is, do what works for you. As long as you're moving forward and in the correct direction, I think that's the only thing you should look at, right? Because everybody will teach you their own ways of managing their time and keeping a check on the number of things they do. If you want to document it, please do that. If you feel you want to share it with others, do that, right? I think one excellent way of checking your level of understanding is to please write articles, prepare a YouTube video, or share something on LinkedIn, right? See, how it helps is in multiple ways. One is that it helps you articulate your thoughts in a systematic manner. So while you might have watched 15 hours of videos on a certain topic, you never have the urge or the need to lay it down in a systematic manner. It's quite scattered in your head. And you don't really sit down and do it because there's no need, right? But when you know that you have to present it in the form of an article, you realize that, oh, there is a lot of homework that you have to do, right? For example, for me, YouTube is super important. And a lot of people are very bemused when they say, why do you spend so much time on it? I mean, you have 2,800 subscribers and less than 50,000 views. And I tell them it's not really about the numbers, it's about the quality, right? For people who I'm trying to tap into, which are corporate clients, I know that this is making an impact, and I'm able to present myself to a larger audience, right? So I think I would advise everybody to create a YouTube channel. I feel YouTube is one of the best ways to hone your ability to articulate your learning, to be able to prepare it in a presentable format, and to obviously work on your communication skill as well, right? I am a strong advocate of YouTube. And I think all the reasons that you gave yourself not to make a video, just forget it and just do it, right? I mean, silly excuses that I hear are, what value am I adding? There are other people doing a much better job. Let me give you, an eye opener. There will always be better people than you out there. When you break it down, when I say, okay, within Excel VBA, are there better people than me? Of course. Are there better people than me who do data visualization? Yes. Are there better people than me who are consultants? Yes. But I am not one person, I'm a sum of all the parts. I am who I am because I have a combination of these learnings, right? It's not a T-shaped learning where I have a little bit of knowledge of everything and a very deep knowledge of something. It's more complex than that, right? So yeah, I think that's my advice to everyone. Do what works for you. Be always open to see what others are doing in case you feel there is something to extract from it. And demonstrating your learning is super important, right? And do it in a way that is reproducible, that is shareable. Like, don't do an internal training for your peers. I'll tell you the reason why. Because you do that training, you spend 60 minutes with everyone, but because it is not recorded, you can't reuse it. The reason I like YouTube is that when I do a live session, I record it and it is for posterity, right? I can share it with others. I can go back to it. I can modify it in the future, right? There are a lot of advantages that come that way.
Makes sense. So one final question for you, Havish. So given that this is your 3 years of completion, you will be completing 3 years of Havish M consulting. You have done so many workshops, trainings, and have an experience of working with so many clients. So what is one advice you would have given to your younger self when you were starting out on your own and creating this path in analytics?
Yeah, it's very hard to do that. I'll tell you why, because how I feel today and how I felt when I was in my 20s or mid-20s or when I was 30 is very different, right? It's not the correct thing to say that, this is what I will say to a 13-year-old myself. I knew when I was in school that I can't do a 9 to 5. You know, it's very hard to explain why I knew that, but I knew I can't do a 9 to 5. And one thing led to another, and I knew I had to come and do my own thing, right? The advice I will give is not to my younger self, but to all the other younger selves out there, people who are maybe 5 or 7 years younger to me.
Yeah.
If you want to become an entrepreneur, it's a tough road, okay? And that's true not just for me, but for everybody else. And the reason it is tough is not because of the high risk. You know, a lot of people say, oh, it's the high risk that makes it a little tough. No, it's not just that. There are a lot of other things in life that are risky, right? Even a corporate job might be risky. The reason being an entrepreneur is tough is because it's a very solitary exercise, you know. There is no HR to give you a pep talk. You know, there is no manager who you can look up to. You basically have to figure out your shit yourself, right? And that's what makes it really, really challenging, right? And as an entrepreneur, you have to deal with the high highs and the low lows, right? Because one day you bag a client and it's euphoria, and the second day you just crash. You know, a payment doesn't come on time or whatever happens, you lose a project. Dealing with that is super important, right? Learning that thin line between confidence and overconfidence is very, very important, right? So learn to be humble, learn to build that good relationship. Remember that good effort will give you rewards in mysterious ways. You know, I've had good things come back to me after 2-3 years, right? I mean, I might have done something for a person 3 years back and I just got a project via somebody else through a referral. So it's all karma, right? I mean, you do good and keep on doing good towards others and it is going to come back to you. But entrepreneurship is a tough road. And I always believe that if you need motivation from somebody that, yes, you should be an entrepreneur, I don't think you should be one, right? I think anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur is going to do it, come what may, right? He might hear the most practical things and the reasons not to do it, but you know you have to do it, you'll figure out a way to do it. You know, that's how I'll put it.
Yeah, that's great advice, Havish. And thanks a lot for sharing all your insights and tips and tricks, be it your personal journey, entrepreneurship, or when it comes to analytics and visualization. I think this session has been greatly helpful. Personally, for me, I got a lot of points that I would like to research about or study about from this conversation, and hope the listeners also benefit from it. Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you, Havish.
Thank you, Prabal.
Sure. That's a wrap from our end.